anniversary of Gradually Wizardly, and I've been thinking about what I should do to kind of mark the occasion. I feel like something should be done for it. So I would like to issue a build challenge. The original thought for this challenge was a skill building thing. Learn something new every day. So here's the challenge.
I don't know.
Build something you could not have made 5 years ago. Film the product, the process, upload it to YouTube, and use the hashtag 5yearsagochallenge. I want you to not just make a thing you couldn't make before, but I want you to give it away to somebody who I want that to be part of the thing. And as a prize for this, I will be giving away my 5-year challenge project to whoever wins.
All right, my name is Garrett Duncan. I saw a challenge from a fella I used to know many years ago named Phil. It's a 5-year challenge. It's to build something I couldn't have built 5 years ago, to show some skills I've learned in the last 5 years, maybe use some new skills, and then give it away. So I saw a table online, I believe it was Wood Whisperer, their fancy end table, fancy sofa table. And I'm going to use that as inspiration for my own side table. Now, the first thing I thought about this was, oh crap, people are going to see in my messy wood shop. And then I narrowed it down and said, oh crap, person's going to see that. And so I will do my best to work through what I'm doing, how I'm doing it, and we'll see how it turns out. This is some walnut I got from my little brother and some white oak I got from Facebook Marketplace. I think it'll be a good contrast for this table. This is me drawing out the basic plan of what I'm going to be doing. It's based off the Wood Whisperer's fancy side table. Rough dimensions 20 by 10, and then I'm drawing out the bottom here. I was going to go about 2 by 2 for each of these side supports, or the feet. And then this is me drawing out the dados I'm going to be using for the legs. So similar to, well, I mean, exactly what the Wood Whisperer did. Gonna have fanned out pieces of oak drawn in at the bottom. Gonna have those going on either side. So nice thin strips there that I'll be able to slot into the top of the table. And then across the bottom, I'm going to use just a piece of oak to maintain that contrast through the table. This is my walnut top, my walnut feet. I cut a spare because I figured I'm going to screw one up. And then up top is some of the oak. I'm going to have to finish a bunch more to get this project going, but it should be nice. This is some laminated oak. I put 2 pieces together. I'd finished the inside before gluing, and now I'm just cleaning up the new outside edges for the bottom center support. I now want to plane the laminated oak to the same thickness as the walnut, which I will show here. Okay, just working with the planer, the joint oak, going through, I'll slowly bring it down to get to this thickness, and I'll use the same gauge, which is handily, usually magnetically attached to the top of my planer, to measure the final thickness, and so they match for the bottom feet and cross support. This is where we start getting fancy. So I'm using some spare plywood and cutting some slots, the same size slots I'm going to use for the tabletop, so I can measure my test pieces. And it only took me 7 tries to get a piece that was what I thought was going to be a good thickness. You'll see more on that later. I wish I'd known what I know now. So away we go. Just cutting a whole bunch of thin pieces, a couple extras. I'm going to have some in-between supports that I'm going to have. And then once these are all cut and laid out, I can start getting ready for the rest of the build. All right, so I got the top lined up, just going to find center and work out from there. Measuring out, I want to have 7 fingers. So get the gaps for in between so they're nice and evenly spaced, and then cutting each of these slots through the walnut top, setting my stop on my miter fence there, and flipping and flopping as I work my way around the top. Now, what you'll see coming up is one thing I hadn't considered, and felt I was too far along the way by the time I figured it out, was with all the flipping and such and poor planning, I ended up with tear out on the top, which you'll see in a moment. At the time, I thought it was going to be a lesson learned and I could just fill in the torn out bits, but things get interesting. Miter saw for leg length and for the in-between pieces that are going to go between the fingers. I lay them out nicely on the bench, and this is what I want them to look like after they have been glued up, and they look pretty nice at this point. Just wait and see. This is where I should have known things were going to go wrong. The glue was super slow to come out of my fancy glue bottle there, and started questioning myself as to why that's happening, but push through. You know, once the glue starts flowing, you've only got so much time to work with. Well, you'll see in a moment here that the top of the glue bottle blew off. Glue went everywhere, which caused me to go into panic clean mode. At the same time, I also had to get this put together because the glue only has so much set time. And in the midst of it all fell on the floor and into the leaves and I had to pull it out. It was absolutely awful. So this is a new glue bottle, or different glue bottle with different glue. Nice and smooth flow out of there. You get that glue all spread out. We have it spread across all the fingers now, so we're going to slowly put them together, trying to align them as I go. I'm going to get very messy in this process, but life could be worse. A bit of a tedious process. So many of these, trying to get them all together. They're all very thin. And one part the wood whisperer avoided that I wish I'd considered before I got into this. They had used an angled top edge for their spacer pieces, which allowed them to have, or for it to be a little less obvious if there was any offset between those pieces, where I was trying to keep a perfectly flat alignment. You'll see here that not the easiest thing to do. I've got a square at the bottom, I got glue everywhere, trying to get it clamped, hold everything flat, fingers covered in glue, get the second clamp going. It was a bit of a mess, and believe it or not, this went significantly better than the first one, which I was picking leaves and sawdust out of while trying to do all this at the same time. So I'll get this set, get it cleaned up, and then let it dry overnight inside. So the legs have been cleaned up, and then I set them onto the feet so I can get a measurement for my dado. So with the stack set and the fence set, I forgot my backer piece at this point, but I will correct and get that sorted out shortly. So I have to be careful measuring my inside and outside edge for the dado, and then I will come back afterwards and hog out the center, just get that nice and cleared out. And after I've finished on the dado, on the dado stack, I'll go through with a chisel and just kind of clean up to make sure I've got a nice smooth surface for my leg to be glued into. So now I'm going to cut the center beam. I've set my fence to the same width as the vertical legs. That way the same width of oak carries on through both verticals and through the center bottom. And then I'm just lining up. I'm going to cut the center beam to the correct length, which I measured using my 2 feet versus the top, just to kind of find out the gap in the middle. And I also forgot to raise my table saw blade height. All part of the learning process. Going to use dowels so that the hardware is hidden. Just 2 dowels through the center support to the feet. Measure out where I'm going to put them. I got fancy with the angle here. This is a bit silly with the offsets, but it is what it is. You learn for next time. Drill press for the dowel holes, and then I'll use the markers from my dowel kit to mark on the feet where the holes for the feet are going to go. All my holes are drilled now. Put the dowels with glue, ample glue on the dowel itself, insert in the hole, ample glue on the end surface, attach the feet to the center support. I get that all squared away, and then I will break out a clamp. Get the clamp on there. After it's nice and put together, I will move it inside so it can properly cure for future machining. Here we go. We're all ready for assembly, essentially. So we've got the top with the slots cut out of it. We have the base. The 2 legs will slide into the dado grooves on the base, and then the thin fingers from the legs will go into each of the slots on the top, and it should look super pretty right until about the time that the kids start spilling and coloring on it. But that's the way furniture goes with young kids around. So I'm going to be using epoxy for the longer working time. Allow me a little bit more leeway when I'm trying to get this all set up. I stir it up there, and then I've got this application spatula, a little plastic piece. Just so happens it fit perfectly into the grooves that I have cut into the end of this table. So now this is where things start to get a little bit hairy. Juggling all 7 of these fingers. They're very springy and didn't want to go into place. It's a good thing the sound isn't turned on right now for what was coming out of my mouth, because this would probably very quickly turn from a PG or G performance into something that my kids wouldn't be allowed to watch. So just a variety of tapping and hammers. You see I started at the one side and worked my way over. I think this is what caused me the issues you are about to see. Putting too much stress on that one outside piece and then trying to pull everything away from it. Hindsight, which you'll see I'll get to live soon, I would start at the center and work out from there. So bigger hammer. What I found is that once the epoxy got into the gaps, the snug clearance I had was suddenly a very, very, very tight clearance, which you can see me struggling with. I'm kind of pot committed at this point. I've got the fingers in, the epoxy on the top. Everything's epoxied, so I'm going to get these fingers in there and let the dust settle and see how to deal with it after. Again, bigger hammer. I'm trying to figure out how to get this to work at this point. You can see some bits smashed oak there. This is a mess, and you can probably imagine the plethora of curse words going through my head. So at this point, you'll see that the far top right finger is wobbling. The glue came undone at that joint. So I think this is again partly because I started at that side and worked out. If you look and see, you can see that the far left has more bend, and yeah, it's definitely a mess. So at this point, I've got the fingers in. I'm trying to even them out. So I have a straight bottom, because again, working from the one side out, I could see that I had an angle at my bottom support. And now I'm also going to try and put some epoxy or glue, I forget which I used, onto that top finger. get some clamps, you know, just try to recover and save what I've got here now. At this point, I didn't realize the whole thing was completely pooched, but you'll find that out shortly. After using some epoxy to try to attach that outside finger there, I've got a clamp on it. I'm going to get a second clamp onto it and let it all dry out, and hopefully it recovers. At this point, I let out a big exhale, thinking all was well. You know, I had recovered the project and I was going to make it. Then I looked and I saw the big splits running down most of the length on the walnut. So the fingers being snug, add in the epoxy, became tight, and me getting them in there, I got them in there, but that 2-inch thick piece of walnut did not like it. Alright, so after that unfortunate happening with the other table, I got to the point where I essentially had to restart everything. So I'm going to kind of fast forward through this. A lot of it is going to be the same or very similar to what I had done before. Some things that I did change based on the experience of what I had gone through. I decided that I was going to use 5 fingers rather than 7 fingers, and I was going to have double spacing between those fingers rather than single spacing, so that would mean 2 little pieces of wood rather than 1. I also decided to incorporate the angle on the spacer pieces, just to allow myself a little bit more flexibility when I was gluing those up. So this is going to go along pretty quickly. A lot of it's very similar or the same, as I said, as what I did before. I used the old tabletop as my test piece for when I was cutting these thin strips here. So this is going to be me testing out the thin strips, and I'm also going to make sure I leave a little bit more space between them, or a little bit less snug this time to give myself room for the epoxy. So yeah, I will carry on. This is a full rebuild of everything you saw earlier, and it will go pretty quickly. As I mentioned, I added angles to the in-between spacers. I'm using 5 fingers rather than 7 fingers, and I'm using double spacing to cut down on the angle required to expand it as far as it needs to be expanded. Then I'm going to work through on gluing these up. The gluing process for these is the same as it was for the other ones. I found using this quick clamp here, the blue one at the bottom of your screen, to make it significantly easier. These glue ups were so much simpler than the previous glue ups. You know, I'd say practice makes perfect, but this is far from perfect. Practice makes it easier. Definitely the 3rd and 4th time I'm trying to do one of these glue ups. So you see here I've got, or I'm lining the pieces up as I go, and I'm going to come in with a spare spacer just to kind of adjust the curve that I've got set up for those spacer pieces, and then I'll use the blue quick clamp to set it in place before I attach my Bessie clamps. And you can also see how I get the glue stuck to my sweater. So again, with the everything set, I've got that small blue clamp just to kind of hold them in place. I'm using that small piece of wood there to keep them flat. And I lifted the whole thing up, put it in between 2 of the Bessie clamps there, snugged it up. I'm going to come in with a baby wipe just to clean off some of that excess glue to make the final cleanup easier. And then I'll leave these inside overnight to dry properly rather than the garage, which is getting cold. So now that I've got the legs glued up, I have my new top and I have my feet. I'm going to carry on with the same process I went through before. So that's going to be putting the feet on top of the tabletop and then measuring how much of a gap I need for my center spacer. Going to be putting the legs on top of the feet and finding out how much of a dado I need, and then going through cutting my dado, cutting my dowels, drilling my dowels, and getting this all put together once again. So I've got the slots cut into the new tabletop. I used a backer board this time, which prevented tear out in the top, so I'm happier with that result. And I'm now moving on to the dados in the new feet. I have a helper here sitting with me now.
Hi, my name's Georgina.
And she's going to supervise as I go through this portion of my project. As I was hogging out the second foot, I made the biggest mistake I've made while woodworking. Definitely a close call that could have gone significantly worse. So I didn't lift it up high enough. You'll see me catch on both sides of the blade, threw the piece of wood out of my hand. Took a moment, checked the damage, finished what I was doing, and then took a minute to regroup. It's a good reminder here. I was monologuing in this portion, but I've had to cut it down for time. Definitely keep your wits about you when you're doing this. Complacency is real, and clearly I got lucky and this could have gone worse. So I got my dry fit complete. My legs are in my feet. Turns out one of the legs was slightly wider than the other, so I had to take my time and make sure that I get it set up correctly. Drew my builder's triangles at the bottom, so when I go to assemble, we're all lined up. So then I'm now going to move into sanding. I'm going to sand the top down to make it much nicer and easier to work with. I didn't do this. So I've now got the top sanded. I did at the end of all this all around. The final sand up top more efficient will come afterwards once I've trimmed the legs down. So as I did before, I've got epoxy and I'm using my spatula to fill in the grooves. I'm going to make sure I get a nice coating of epoxy there, and I'm thankful that I put a larger clearance in this time. So I'll get all of those grooves filled, then I will go to putting the fingers into the grooves. I will start this time in the center and work my way out after learning the lessons I learned from last time. So as you can see, as I'm going through this is much, much easier. I'm able to bend the outer fingers out nice and smoothly. Just small taps with the hammer just to align everything. This is leaps and bounds above what I had hoped it would be, and the improvement versus the first crack at this, oh, it's crack free. So I was just coached by my helper here. I had explained that I was using a flush trim plane to clean up some of the epoxy, and then my flush cut saw, and per directed drawing, you're supposed to show it. So here's me. I used my my wee plane there. This is me using my flush saw just to cut everything closer on the one side there, and then after this I'm going to move into sanding and cleaning up to try and maintain a flush surface. One concern I have, you'll see me flapping my fingers about, is causing a rounded edge on either side coming down towards the fingers and being high in the center. So it's something I'm going to be trying to be cognizant of and hopefully not have affect me. So then along from here, I have a lot more sanding. I've definitely trimmed this footage down. There was like 2.5 hours at least, and I didn't even record it all. This is me just cleaning up the bottom, and then what I'm going to do next is I'm going to clean up the feet and cross brace piece, and I'm also going to take those over to the router table where I'm just going to add a polite little round over on the edge there just to smooth it out and give it a bit more of a finished look. So, I mean, it's not very exciting to watch sanding, which is why I decided to cut most of it out. And then again, I assume most of you have left long before now.
Thank you so much if you are still watching this. My daddy worked very, very hard on this.
Thank you, Georgina. So I've got my table upside down here now, and I'm going to use my digital angle meter to measure the angle between the two. I'll set it to 0 at the bottom and move it up top, try to get it very close. I figured this was easier than using my old bubble level, being I'd have to figure out how much of a bubble on the right line I was. Very difficult. So yeah, the digital meter ended up working very well. It gave me a little bit of a lip on either side of the legs. You can see them just kind of poking out the bottom of the feet. So we'll get this set up. I'll rough it in pretty close, and then I will get the glue going, set it again, and use a clamp and hope for the best. So I've shown here, I've got the clamp on. The angle was pretty good. I was very happy with it. Clamped it up, left it inside the house for a good 24 hours. And I then brought it back out for the final finishing touches. Now, this next set of videos is going to be trimmed dramatically. I've got the bottom lips there, you can see on the feet with the glue surrounding it. I've got those to trim and flush. I ended up using the router table with a flush trim bit. And then I progressed from there to sanding the top. I attached the top to a piece of plank coming off my bench using some double-sided tape, just because I found the legs to be very wobbly with my sander. I thought this would be much more supportive, and it definitely was. From there, I move into try to flush the legs up a bit. I had a little bit of a rounding from when I had sanded the ends, so I did my best to clean that up. One end is definitely better than the other end, but that's all right. It's all, once again, part of the learning process. And from here, I will then transition on to doing a little bit of hand sanding and then move on to the finish. So I decided for this table I was going to use Odie's oil as the finish. It's a wonderful finish to work with, mostly because it smells nice. Does a nice job. You'll see it's obviously very quick speed here as I'm working through this. Going to do my best to coat the entire surface, top, bottom, left, right, everything in between. And one specifically taxing or difficult part of this was trying to get in all between all the fingers, up and down the entire length of the fingers, get the gaps. You can see it turns out pretty good as we work through it. So yeah, not really a whole lot to say here. I might just let you watch the beauty evolve in silence. I'll sit there like that. It's been something. Definitely a challenge. Happy I've done it. It's been a good 5 years and hopefully many, many, many more. Yeah. I hope you enjoyed this wee table, and I won't show Yammerdawn's reaction when I give it to her because she's not known for smiling at the best of times. So I hate for her to give like this really angry looking face that I'm sure is filled with love and joy. But any person of like 3 who viewed it and make it that far might think she's a terrible human being. So probably don't want to do that. All right. Thanks for watching. So I decided that I would do a wee video shoot so you can see all the angles. Don't mind the junk in the background. Just focus on the good stuff, like that shot right there. It's turned out to be a really, really nice table. I'm very happy with the oak and the walnuts, the way they work together, but the contrast between them just turned out really well. It should be a good size, should last many, many years to come. Thank you for coming along with me with this build. You know, things I learned, and it'll only get better next time. It's been a good 5 years. Well, do you think Mommy's gonna like her table?
Yeah.
I think so too. In the meantime, I think I'm gonna have a drink and then I'm gonna have a nap. Cheers.